Frozen dinners used to be simple. You walked down the freezer aisle, grabbed a tray, tossed it in the oven, and hoped whatever came out tasted at least remotely like the picture on the box. Maybe the meat was questionable. Maybe the gravy looked like it was engineered by a chemistry student. But it was cheap, convenient, and didn't pretend to be anything more. But those days are long gone. Today, the frozen food aisle has become a battleground of marketing tricks, nostalgia bait, and highly engineered meals that often have more preservatives than flavor. Bright packaging and comforting buzzwords hide the truth. Behind many of these boxes are sodium bombs, processed protein patties, and sauces, thick enough to survive a nuclear winter. And while shoppers keep tossing them into their carts out of habit or desperation, the industry keeps cutting corners, because most people never question what's actually inside these trays. But not all frozen dinners are disasters. Some brands have quietly started raising the bar, prioritizing real ingredients, smarter cooking techniques, and flavors that actually resemble restaurant food. And buried among the bland, the rubbery, and the sodium-soaked, there are frozen meals that are genuinely worth your freezer space. So, today we're pulling back the frost-covered curtain and diving into 5 frozen dinners you should never buy under any circumstances. And 5 that are shockingly great. By the time we reach number 1, you will understand just how big the gap is between the worst offenders and the frozen meals that actually deliver on their promises. This is the true story of the frozen aisle, where nostalgia meets disappointment, and where a handful of brands are fighting to prove that convenience doesn't have to mean compromise. Let's start with the ones you should avoid at all costs. Worst frozen dinners 5. Just one lean cuisine, Swedish meatballs. Lean cuisine was supposed to be the hero of the diet era, a tidy little box that promised portion control without the punishment. Born in the early 1980s, it became the unofficial food group of anyone trying to eat light while still pretending they were having a real meal. And for decades, people bought into the fantasy. Low calories, low guilt, and just enough nostalgia to make you forget what was actually inside the tray. But then you heat it up. The first thing you meet is the unmistakable aroma of meat-adjacent optimism, because calling those Swedish meatballs meatballs is charitable at best. They arrive as dense, rubbery spheres that feel like they were engineered by a lab trying to approximate beef using a TED Talk and a few vague memories. Each bite has that unsettling bounce that makes you question what percentage of the recipe involved actual animals. Then there's the sauce, a pale, watery imitation of what Swedish cream sauce should be. Instead of velvety richness, you get a thin, oddly sweet glaze that seems confused about its own identity. It manages to be both flavorless and artificial at the same time, like someone described Swedish meatballs over a bad phone connection, and lean cuisine tried to recreate it from memory. And the pasta, limp, waterlogged, almost apologetic, as if the noodles absorbed the emotional exhaustion of the entire meal. They sit there, swollen with processing fluid, tasting like they've traveled long distances just to disappoint you. Now, none of this would feel quite as offensive if the meal were at least filling. But at around 280 calories, lean cuisine delivers portion control in the most literal sense. It controls you right into a second dinner. Reviewers consistently describe the experience as a paradox. You finish the tray feeling both hungry and unsatisfied, a combination only lean cuisine seems able to achieve with such consistency. The sodium content, roughly 700 milligrams, lands in that uncomfortable middle ground where it is not low enough to seem healthy, but not high enough to explain why it tastes the way it does. You're essentially paying $4 for diet theater. It looks like a meal, checks the boxes like a meal, but somehow never behaves like one. And yet, lean cuisine still sells. Why? Because the brand became synonymous with dieting decades ago. It built its empire on the promise that low-calorie equals good, and many shoppers still toss it into their carts out of habit, not taste. The packaging whispers, "This is healthy." The experience whispers back, "This is punishment." Lean cuisine didn't just miss the mark. It created a meal so devoid of satisfaction that eating it feels less like dinner and more like atonement. Worst the Raskashkatu, Guy Fieri's Flavortown Buffalo Chicken Pasta. When Guy Fieri announced he was bringing Flavortown to the frozen aisle, it sounded like a rare win for microwave meals everywhere. After all, this is the man who built an empire on big flavors, bold sauces, and unapologetic indulgence. If anyone could rescue the sad, soggy world of frozen pasta, surely it was the mayor of Flavortown himself. Unfortunately, what landed in stores wasn't a ticket to Flavortown. It was a one-way bus ride to Regret City. The tragedy begins the moment the tray exits the microwave. Instead of a thick, creamy buffalo cheese sauce hugging each piece of pasta, you get an oily orange slick that separates into layers like a bad relationship. The fat floats to the top in a shimmering puddle, while the watery remnants of what was supposed to be sauce cling to the bottom of the tray, too defeated to even try. The buffalo flavor itself is questionable. Not tangy, not spicy, not even recognizable. It tastes like someone asked an AI to generate buffalo sauce using only verbal descriptions and 0 ingredients. The result falls somewhere between chemical heat and emotional instability. Then the chicken makes its appearance, dry, tough, and suspiciously chewy, as if it were cooked, frozen, recooked, lost, rediscovered, frozen again, and finally tossed in at the last second. Each piece has the unmistakable texture of protein that has lived too many lives. But the real villain of this meal? The scallions. They're supposed to bring freshness, a little bite, maybe a hint of brightness. Instead, they hit you with a full-scale onion assault so aggressive it feels personal. Every forkful tastes like someone chopped a fistful of raw scallions directly into your soul. The pasta, burdened by all this chaos, gives up entirely. Overcooked and mushy, the noodles disintegrate on contact, creating a texture that can best be described as unmotivated. Multiple reviewers didn't just call this meal bad, they called it gross, which is remarkable in a category where expectations are already subterranean. And yet the price sits at a bold $5-6, a premium tag for a product that tastes like it should be sold next to the clearance canned goods with a sticker that says, "We're sorry." So why is it still on shelves? Because it says Guy Fieri on the box. Curiosity alone keeps this meal alive. People see the hair, the flames, the promise of Flavortown, and they take a chance. And after one bite, they realize what everyone eventually realizes. A celebrity endorsement can sell a frozen dinner, but it cannot save a bad one. Worst, number 3. Marie Callender's chicken pot pie. Marie Callender's built an entire frozen food empire on one promise: comfort. Warm, flaky, homemade-style comfort. And for decades, the chicken pot pie has been the crown jewel, plump, golden, and marketed like it just came out of Grandma's oven. It's the kind of frozen dinner that looks wholesome, filling, and safe. Then you check the nutrition label, and suddenly this innocent-looking pie becomes a criminal act against your daily calorie budget. A single Marie Callender-S chicken pot pie contains 1,040 calories and a jaw-dropping 1,160 milligrams of sodium. That's 85% of the recommended daily intake of sodium before you even count the rest of your meals. Add 58 grams of fat, including 24 grams of saturated fat, and you're essentially eating your entire day in one sitting. If frozen dinners came with warning labels, this one would need blinking lights. But the numbers aren't the only red flag. Once you actually dig into the pot pie, the reality gets even more disappointing. The vegetables, carrots, peas, celery, arrive at the unfortunate intersection of mushy and flavorless, as though they've been boiled into submission long before reaching your freezer. The chicken pieces? They're there, technically. But instead of juicy, tender poultry, you get bland, chewy cubes that have the unmistakable texture of industrial protein, the kind that tastes like it's trying to remember what chicken used to be. The sauce, meanwhile, is one giant salty Band-Aid, desperately trying to mask the lack of real flavor by flooding your taste buds with sodium. It's thick but somehow not rich, creamy but not comforting, and overwhelmingly artificial. And then there's the crust. Oh, the crust. Frozen pot pies live and die by the crust, and Marie Callender's crust should be its saving grace. Instead, it emerges from the oven, tough, leathery, and greasy, as if it spent the bake cycle reconsidering its life choices. Instead of that iconic, golden flakiness, you get something that crumbles unpredictably. Too hard in some spots, too oily in others. Cutting into it feels less like dinner, and more like archaeological excavation. Layers of crust giving way to pockets of molten filling that somehow manage to be both overly thick and watery at the same time. Yet despite the nutritional nightmare and underwhelming flavor, this pot pie continues to fly off shelves. Why? Because it looks substantial. It feels like value. And it taps directly into America's collective nostalgia for mom's kitchen, Sunday dinners, and simpler times. It's comfort food theater. Nice to imagine, less nice to eat. Marie Callender's pot pie isn't the worst thing in the frozen aisle, but it's definitely the most deceptive. It promises warmth, nostalgia, and satisfaction, and delivers a calorie bomb wrapped in disappointment. Worst. 4. Hungry Man Boneless Fried Chicken. Hungry Man has never been subtle about its mission. Since its launch in 1973, the brand has marketed itself to men who want big meals, big portions, and absolutely zero conversations about calories. The name literally screams its target demographic, Hungry Man, as if sheer quantity can distract from everything else happening inside the box. And nowhere is this philosophy more obvious, or more disastrous, than in the boneless fried chicken dinner. At first glance, it seems promising. A full pound of food, a towering tray packed with chicken patties, mashed potatoes, corn, and even a dessert. A whole mini banquet, designed to make you feel like you're getting maximum value for your money. But once you peel back the film, reality arrives quickly and aggressively. The fried chicken patties are the first warning sign. Instead of golden, crispy cutlets, you get flat, breaded discs that resemble fried chicken only in concept. In the microwave, because almost nobody is oven baking a Hungry Man tray, the breading collapses into a strange hybrid texture. Limp, chewy, and somehow rubbery all at once. It's the kind of texture that makes you pause mid-bite and wonder whether you should continue. Inside the breading is an even bigger mystery. The chicken has all the seasoning and personality of a damp paper towel. Bland, dense, and oddly sponge-like, it doesn't evoke the word fried so much as processed until it forgot what flavor was. Then come the sides, if you can call them that. The corn tastes exactly like every frozen corn you've ever had, which is to say, not good, not bad, just aggressively average. The mashed potatoes, however, fare worse. They have that unmistakable instant potato texture, smooth in a way nature never intended, gummy in places, and oddly metallic in aftertaste. And we haven't even reached the nutritional profile yet, which reads like a threat. Some varieties of Hungry Man meals reach up to 970 calories and a staggering 2,170 milligrams of sodium. That's 120% of your daily sodium intake in one microwave dinner. Eating this isn't just unhealthy, it's like scheduling a blood pressure emergency. Even the dessert, a brownie tucked in the corner like a consolation prize, manages to disappoint. It somehow achieves the impossible, being dry, gummy, and sticky at the same time. A textural contradiction that serves as the perfect metaphor for the entire Hungry Man experience. Despite all of this, the brand continues to sell well. Why? Because the trays look huge, because the box says man-sized, because somewhere the psychological equation of more food, better value still tricks shoppers into believing the meal is worthwhile. But here's the truth. Hungry Man isn't selling quality. It's selling volume. A lot of volume. Enough volume to overshadow the fact that most of the food inside tastes like a processed experiment that escaped a lab. Hungry Man promises satisfaction. But what it delivers is a cardiovascular event wrapped in plastic, disguised as dinner. Worst. 5. Banquet Salisbury Steak. If the frozen food aisle had a hall of shame, Banquet's Salisbury Steak wouldn't just have a plaque, it would have its own entire wing. This meal has been around since the 1950s, one of America's very first TV dinners, and somehow, 7 decades later, it tastes almost exactly the same. Which would be impressive, if it weren't so consistently terrible. Calling this entree Salisbury Steak feels generous. What you actually get is a flat, greyish patty that looks less like beef and more like beef-themed construction material. One bite confirms the suspicion. Instead of recognizable meat, you get a blend of fillers, binders, textured vegetable protein, and something that might once have been acquainted with a cow. It has the unmistakable flavor of meat-adjacent matter. But the real star, or villain of the show, is the gravy. Banquet has engineered a sauce so uniquely unpleasant that it deserves scientific study. Thick, gelatinous, and disturbingly shiny, it wiggles more than it pours. The flavor is aggressively salty, yet somehow devoid of actual seasoning, as if it's trying to distract you with sodium while offering absolutely nothing else. Sludge is not a word you usually want associated with your dinner, but here we are. The mashed potatoes don't offer much redemption. They come across as gluey, artificial, and eerily smooth, like someone whipped instant potatoes with a jar of preservatives. They stick to the fork in a way nature never intended. The corn, the only side that occasionally survives taste tests, is acceptable purely because corn is almost impossible to ruin, even for Banquet. Then there's the nutrition label, which reads like the punchline to a dark joke. A single Banquet Salisbury steak dinner contains around 790 calories and 2,400 milligrams of sodium. That's 108% of the daily recommended sodium intake, delivered straight to your bloodstream via a plastic tray. The ingredient list could double as a chemistry exam, packed with modified starches, hydrogenated proteins, stabilizers, and preservatives you need a dictionary to decode. But here, as the wild part, Banquet Salisbury steak remains one of the top-selling frozen dinners in America. Why? Price and nostalgia. At $2 per tray, Banquet is by far the cheapest full meal in the freezer aisle. For families on tight budgets, that matters. For adults who grew up eating it in front of the TV, nostalgia matters too. The brand leans heavily on the idea that its terrible quality is somehow charming. Like a childhood memory you force yourself to relive, even though you know better. But let's be honest, nostalgia doesn't make the gravy less gelatinous. And low cost doesn't make the steak taste any closer to actual beef. Banquet Salisbury. Steak isn't just a bad frozen dinner. It's a cultural experience. Proof that price and tradition can keep even the least appetizing products alive for generations. It survives because we let it. Because it's cheap. Because it reminds people of the past. But make no mistake, this is the undisputed champion of terrible frozen meals. A tray of regret so iconic it might actually be immortal. Best Frozen Dinners 5. Best Bureau 1 InnovAsian Orange Chicken. After trudging through the wasteland of rubbery meatballs and gelatinous gravies, arriving at InnovAsian's orange chicken feels like stumbling into an oasis. This is the moment in the frozen dinner saga where you realize, oh, frozen food doesn't have to be terrible. In fact, it can be shockingly good. InnovAsian launched in 2005 with a simple, almost rebellious question. What if frozen Asian food actually tasted like Asian food? Not a sugary, Americanized interpretation. Not a tray full of syrup-coated mystery nuggets, but real flavors, real textures, and ingredients that didn't taste like they'd been processed into emotional trauma. Their orange chicken became the breakout star, and for good reason. The magic begins with the chicken itself. It arrives with a coating that does something nearly impossible in the frozen meal world. It stays crispy, even in the microwave. Even if you ignore the instructions and slightly overcook it, because, let's be honest, we all do. The breading retains a crunchy shell that crackles when you bite in, revealing tender, juicy chicken beneath. This alone puts InnovAsian miles above most freezer aisle competitors, who seem to believe soggy nuggets floating in sugar soup is the only acceptable format. But the sauce is where the real artistry comes in. Instead of that cloying, sticky orange goop most frozen brands rely on, InnovAsian delivers a balanced blend of sweet, tangy, and bright citrus. You can taste actual orange, actual ginger, actual spice. The sauce has nuance, something frozen meals aren't exactly famous for. It coats the chicken instead of drowning it, clinging in glossy ribbons rather than pooling into a neon puddle. Every bite feels deliberate, not mass-produced. The vegetables, usually tossed in as obligatory filler by every other brand, actually contribute to the dish here. The broccoli stays green and firm, the bell peppers hold their structure. Nothing turns into that sad, mushy beige blend you find at the bottom of cheap frozen dinners. You can tell these veggies were flash frozen at their peak, not after a long, demoralizing journey through a processing facility. Nutritionally, InnovAsian sits comfortably in the reasonable range, around 400 calories per serving, with moderate sodium for this category. Not health food, but not a dietary crime scene either. More importantly, you feel satisfied afterward, not bloated, not hungry, just fed. Food bloggers consistently place InnovAsian at the top of the frozen Asian category. Taste tests praise the crispy chicken, the authenticity of the sauce, and the fact that it tastes like something you might actually order from a restaurant, and not a restaurant you regret ordering from. That's the secret to InnovAsian's success. They treat frozen food, not like a science experiment. And while the price hovers around $6-7, definitely higher than bargain bin brands, it earns every penny. InnovAsian didn't cut corners to reach a price point. They created a meal good enough that people don't mind paying more. In a freezer aisle filled with disappointment, this dish doesn't just stand out. It proves what frozen food can be when someone actually tries. Best in MM2 Trader Joe's Chicken Tikka Masala. Trader Joe AS has a reputation, some might even call it a cult following, for turning everyday grocery items into miniature culinary adventures. Their frozen aisle, especially, is legendary for producing meals that taste far better than their price tags suggest. And nowhere is that magic more obvious than in one of their all-time best-selling dishes, Chicken Tikka Masala. When Trader Joe's launched their line of Indian-inspired frozen meals in the 2000s, most shoppers expected the usual outcome: bland sauce, questionable spices, and chicken that tasted like it had been boiled into emotional surrender. Instead, they delivered something shockingly different. A frozen dinner that tasted real. The moment you peel back the film, you can smell the difference. This isn't the sugary tomato paste masquerading as masala that so many brands lean on. This sauce is fragrant, layered with cumin, fenugreek, coriander, garlic, and ginger. It actually smells like an Indian kitchen, not like a generic, ethnic flavor attempt run through a focus group. The chicken itself is properly marinated, which is almost unheard of in frozen meals. You can actually see the spices clinging to the surface. It's tender, juicy, and tastes like it spent real time soaking in tikka spices, rather than being dunked into sauce as an afterthought. Every bite feels intentional, like someone cared how it would turn out. And then there's the sauce. A true tikka masala should strike a delicate balance. Tangy tomato richness, creamy depth, warm spices, and a subtle heat that builds without overwhelming. Trader Joe's nails it. The sauce doesn't just sit on top of the chicken, it permeates it, coating each bite in flavor that tastes developed, not manufactured. For many customers, this dish becomes the moment they realize frozen Indian food can be good, restaurant-adjacent good. I would pay $15 for this in a sit-down restaurant good. The basmati rice included on the side completes the experience. It cooks up fragrant and fluffy, not clumpy or mushy. Frozen rice usually goes wrong in two ways. It's either gummy or bone dry. Trader Joe's somehow threads the needle perfectly, delivering a texture that feels like it was just steamed. And then comes the best part, the price. At around $4 to $5, Trader Joe AS Tikka Masala costs a third of what you would pay at an Indian restaurant, but delivers flavor that has consistently surprised chefs, reviewers, and customers alike. No wonder it has a near-permanent spot on Trader Joe's most loved products lists. Nutritionally, it lands in a reasonable middle ground, roughly 360-400 calories, enough to be satisfying, not enough to require a nap. It's comfort food that doesn't punish you for enjoying it. This dish succeeds because Trader Joe's knows its audience, shoppers who want global flavors, quality ingredients, and fair prices. Customers who care about authenticity but don't want to spend $20 on takeout. People who want convenience without compromise. In a frozen aisle full of shortcuts and sugar-loaded sauces, Trader Joe's Chicken Tikka Masala does something almost radical. It respects the cuisine it's inspired by. And that's why it isn't just good for frozen food, it's genuinely good, period. Best of 3 healthy choice, Powerball, chicken marinara. For decades, healthy frozen meals were code for punishment. Tiny portions, flavorless sauces, vegetables steamed into oblivion, and chicken that tasted like it was seasoned with disappointment. Lean Cuisine and its competitors taught an entire generation that healthy eating meant sacrificing joy. Then Healthy Choice introduced the Power Bowls, and everything changed. The chicken marinara version isn't just a better diet meal. It is a blueprint for what frozen, healthy food should have always been. Balanced, satisfying, and made with ingredients that act like they've actually met a kitchen before. The first thing you notice is the chicken. Not sponge-textured chicken. Not boiled then dyed chicken. Actual grilled chicken, complete with char marks. Marks that aren't just printed on, but come from chicken that was genuinely grilled before freezing. Each piece has seasoning, structure, and bite, not that weird bouncy texture that diet meals have been trying to normalize since the 80s. Then comes the marinara sauce. This isn't the overly sweet, generic red sludge that so many frozen Italian-style meals rely on. The sauce here tastes like someone chopped real tomatoes, simmered them with garlic, oregano, and basil, and actually let the flavors develop. You can taste the acidity, the herbs, the freshness, nothing metallic, nothing artificial. The pasta, whole grain and hearty, brings actual substance. Instead of soft, deflated noodles, you get pasta with texture, the kind that helps you feel genuinely full instead of tricked into believing you've eaten enough. It absorbs the marinara beautifully, transforming each bite into something warm and comforting. And then there are the vegetables, zucchini, peppers, spinach. Each one still has bite, color, and flavor. They aren't mush, they aren't watery, and they aren't the sad steamed-to-death veggies you find in most diet meals. The secret is Healthy Choice's steam cooking process, which preserves texture instead of obliterating it. But where this bowl really shines is in the nutritional design. At around 300–350 calories, with 25–30 grams of protein, it delivers something lean cuisine has never managed: satiety. You don't finish it and immediately think, okay, what else do I have to eat? Instead, you actually feel like you had lunch, real lunch. The sodium, usually the villain of the frozen world, stays relatively restrained at 500–600 milligram, which is practically a miracle. Combined with the balanced macros, the bowl manages to feel filling without the greasy heaviness of more indulgent meals. Healthy Choice didn't just rebrand. They re-engineered what a frozen diet meal should be. They understood that people want flavor, real ingredients, and food that doesn't feel like self-punishment. And by delivering exactly that, they skyrocketed to become the #2 frozen meal brand in America, behind Stouffer's. The Chicken Marinara Power Bowl isn't just a good, healthy frozen meal. It's a middle finger to decades of bland, joyless diet food. It proves that health-conscious eating can be flavorful, satisfying, and genuinely enjoyable. And for millions of shoppers, it's the bowl that turned them from frozen meal skeptics into frozen meal believers. Number 4, Amy's Cheese Enchilada. Amy's Kitchen didn't enter the frozen meal industry trying to out-cheap or outsalt the competition. They entered with a mission. In 1987, while other brands were racing toward lower costs and higher preservatives, Amy's decided to do something borderline radical: make frozen dinners with real ingredients, even if it costs more. And nowhere is that philosophy more beautifully realized than in their cheese enchilada. A dish that has quietly become a cult classic among people who are tired of frozen Mexican food tasting like cafeteria leftovers. From the moment you lift the corner of the film, you can tell this meal is built differently. There's no artificially dyed cheese smell, no suspiciously thick neon red sauce, no soggy tortilla slumped in a pool of sadness. Instead, you get the aroma of chili, tomato, and real cheddar, ingredients that smell like they belong in an actual kitchen. The enchilada itself is a revelation. While other frozen brands use tortillas that turn into either rubber or mush, Amy's manages to thread the needle perfectly. The tortilla holds its structure, softening just enough to wrap around the filling without falling apart or turning leathery. It feels almost handmade, because it is. Amy's famously rolls their tortillas by hand, and it shows in every bite. Then there's the cheese. Most frozen Mexican meals use cheese product, an ominous phrase that basically means dairy-ish. Amy's doesn't play those games. The enchilada is filled with real, sharp cheddar that melts the way cheese is supposed to melt. Smooth, creamy, rich, and delicious. No plastic texture, no oily separation, just actual cheese doing its job. But the real star is the red enchilada sauce. Unlike the overly sweet, overly salty sauces that plague supermarket freezers, Amy's sauce has the depth of Mexican home cooking. You taste real chili, real tomato richness, and just enough spice to warm, not overwhelm, the dish. It's balanced, intentional, and unmistakably handcrafted. The sides complete the picture. The black beans come seasoned, not bland, with a smoky complexity that tastes like someone actually tested the recipe before freezing it. The Spanish-style rice has texture, seasoning, and flavor, not the starchy filler so many competitors throw in as an afterthought. And then there's the ingredient list: organic tomatoes, organic tortillas, organic beans, organic cheese. Not pseudo-cheese, not modified starch blend. Real food. Nutritionally, Amy's enchilada sits comfortably below the danger zone, around 330–380 calories and roughly 680 milligrams of sodium, which is practically saintly compared to the salt licks we saw earlier on this list. It's a frozen dinner that doesn't punish your body for wanting something convenient. Taste tests consistently rank it among the very best Mexican-style frozen meals available. Reviewers praise its homemade feel, clean ingredient list, and balanced flavors. And yes, the price is higher, usually 5 to 6, but fans never complain. They know exactly what they're paying for. Amy's cheese enchilada isn't just good, it's a statement. A statement that frozen meals don't have to taste mass-produced. That organic doesn't have to mean boring. And that even in the frozen aisle, care and craftsmanship still matter. This is the rare meal that proves a simple truth. When you start with real ingredients, you don't have to hide behind salt, sugar, or nostalgia. You can just let the food speak for itself. Best der 5 Stouffer's lasagna with meat and sauce. Every industry has its legend. In the world of frozen dinners, an aisle filled with disappointment, experiments, sodium traps, and nostalgia-fueled mediocrity, there is one product that has transcended trends, outlived competitors, and remained universally respected for over 70 years. Stouffer's lasagna with meat and sauce isn't just the best frozen dinner you can buy. It is the gold standard, the dish against which every other frozen meal, good or bad, is inevitably compared. What makes it so iconic? Consistency, craft, and an unwavering refusal to cut corners, even as the rest of the industry sprinted toward cheaper ingredients and faster production. The moment it emerges from the oven, you understand why it's legendary. The top layer of mozzarella browns into a golden, bubbling blanket. The ricotta layer inside turns creamy and rich without becoming watery or oily. And the pasta, miraculously, keeps its structure. No mush, no collapse, no sad overcooked edges. Each slice holds together like a proper homemade lasagna, revealing clean, well-defined layers. Meat sauce, pasta, ricotta, pasta, meat sauce, cheese. A blueprint executed with precision. The meat sauce is perhaps the most impressive element. Unlike the acidic, sugary red sauces that dominate the frozen aisle, Stouffer's sauce actually tastes like tomatoes, real tomatoes, balanced with herbs, garlic, beef, and long-simmered depth. It has body, richness, and a warmth that instantly reminds you why lasagna remains one of America's most beloved comfort dishes. The beef, too, is real and recognizable. Not pellets, not protein crumbles, not anonymous textured matter. Each bite carries seasoning, texture, and the satisfying flavor of actual meat. Then there's the ricotta layer, soft, creamy, indulgent, but never greasy. It melts into the pasta and meat in a way that feels homemade. Culinary students joke that Stouffer's lasagna is the closest some people ever get to tasting a properly made lasagna. And honestly, they're not wrong. But the real triumph is balance. Every element supports the others. The acidity of the tomatoes, the richness of the cheese, the savoriness of the meat, the softness of the pasta. Nothing overpowers. Nothing tastes artificial. Nothing feels phoned in. And that consistency isn't an accident. Stouffer's has spent nearly 7 decades refining this recipe. Taste tests, customer feedback, and careful iteration have shaped it into a product so reliable that chefs and food critics frequently use it as the baseline when evaluating other frozen meals. Even the nutritional profile makes sense. With about 900 milligrams of sodium per serving and a full tray providing 2 to 3 servings, it doesn't pretend to be health food. It embraces what it is, comfort food, done right. A hearty, satisfying, oven-baked classic that costs $6 to $8 and delivers the kind of warm, nostalgic happiness you usually only get from a family dinner or a good Italian restaurant. That's why it remains the #1 frozen dinner in America, generating hundreds of millions in sales every year. Not because of marketing gimmicks, celebrity endorsements, or nostalgia bait, but because it genuinely tastes good. Because it respects the eater. Because it delivers exactly what it promises. In a freezer aisle filled with shortcuts, Stouffer's isn't just selling lasagna. It's selling craftsmanship, reliability, and the comforting reminder that some brands still care about doing things the right way. Stouffer's lasagna with meat and sauce doesn't just win the list, it defines the category. The frozen dinner aisle is a strange place. It's a mix of nostalgia, marketing illusions, budget traps, and the occasional culinary masterpiece hidden between boxes of regret. Some brands survive because they've earned loyalty over generations. Others survive because they're cheap, familiar, or just loud enough on the shelf to grab your attention before you remember what's actually inside the box. But after walking through the best and worst of the freezer aisle, one thing becomes obvious. Not all frozen meals are created equal. Some are built to respect your time, your taste buds, and your health. Others survive by hoping you're too tired, too rushed, or too broke to notice how bad they truly are. The worst offenders get by on nostalgia, portion-size illusions, and rock-bottom prices that disguise terrible ingredients as value. They depend on repeat marketing, not repeat customers. Their entire business model relies on you settling. But the best meals prove that frozen food can be more than a backup plan. They show that with real ingredients, real technique, and real care, even a microwavable meal can taste like something worth eating. They represent companies that treat frozen dinners like actual food, not like science experiments wrapped in plastic. So the next time you're standing in front of the freezer case, overwhelmed by choices and tempted by the cheapest box, remember this list. Remember the hidden sodium bombs, the celebrity disasters, the texture crimes, and the calorie traps disguised as home-style comfort. And remember the few gems that actually deliver on their promises. Because your freezer isn't a storage unit for disappointment. It's a toolbox, and what you put inside it matters. If this breakdown changed how you'll shop the frozen aisle, hit subscribe, tap the like button, and tell us in the comments. Which frozen dinner did we get right? And which one are you brave enough to try next? Until next time, eat smart and read the labels.